Hey, Richard Miller here again, Facts for Walking People. I just wanted to say a few words a little bit about some of the developments after the killing of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. We saw that there's some of the big corporations have begun to throw some money around to what they call the black community. Well, when you talk about any community, just as a community, you have to figure out which section of the community are they talking about. And Apple and Alphabet and others have promised 100 million here, 100 million there, but they're directing this money. This uprising from below has forced them to throw a few bones out there, and they're directing this money mostly at black colleges. They want to help to build a black middle class, that buffer layer that can between the revolutionary potential of the black working class and themselves, the white ruling class, and of course things have changed since the civil rights movement. There's one or two black bourgeois. I think there's 6 black billionaires, but the main thing is they want to direct that money not to solve the problem. They won't direct the money to solve the problem in the black communities, the working class communities, the poor communities that have historically been neglected. That capitalism cannot do that. So they throw this money out. And I was just looking at, for example, with Blackstone. Blackstone is this huge, it's the largest investment company, and it's the largest buyout firm with $538 billion of assets. And it's talking about recruiting these new bankers and hedge fund managers and these people, and traditionally they get them from the banks already trained. And so what they're going to do now, they're going to go more to the colleges, and it says, as they say, they're going to go directly to the schools, including historically black colleges and universities and women's colleges. So they're all trying to scramble to make some concessions to the black middle class and black business in order to try and strengthen it as that, so it can play that role of that buffer zone in between themselves and the revolutionary potential of the black working class and the sort of movement we've seen over the last year or so. So it's that's what they're trying to do that. But how ridiculous really it is, and how it's clear that it will not solve any of the problems of the quote black community, the working class community, which is most black people, and most of anybody is the working class community. There's an article in Business Week also, Saving America's Black Banks. This was from the August 10th edition. And they're talking about a guy, Michael Render. He's a rapper, an activist, and he's better known as Killer Mike. He's been saying that America needs black banks. They want to lend to black working class people and middle class people because the majority of the banks, which are white owned, it's just black and white in this country is overwhelmingly how these issues are put. They don't serve these people. They don't serve the black working class and the poor. So he's been talking about, an appeal to use black banks, a few black banks, and one of them, One United Bank in Boston, attracted $50 million of new deposits. Of course, it's going to have an appeal to black workers, just like the idea of that we need more businesses in our community, we'll get better jobs and everything else. But as I said before, whenever that comes up, and I think I mentioned it in a different video or an article, if I take most of my co-workers who are working class people, they would say yes, most of my black co-workers, they would say yes, it's better if we had more businesses, we'd get better jobs. But there's always one or two in that element that will not be looking at better jobs for everybody, but it being the person that got the capital and was able to have the business and have other people work. There's a different mentality there. So there's a different reason for why you would support that, why one would support that. But when you look at the bloody figures, it just shows how ridiculous it is. You see, it's shook the hell out of them, this movement has. And so they're talking further about urging consumers and businesses to use their economic power to bolster black-owned lenders. and making them stronger and pushing the industry's giants to boost lending to African Americans can help begin to rectify an imbalance that has left black families with an average net worth that's 1/10 that of white families. I think the average, the median household wealth, I think, for whites is about 177,000, 171,000 annually, and I think for blacks it's about 17, something like that. And so even Netflix is jumping in. And One United has added more than 40,000 customers. Netflix has pledged to shift as much as 100 million to lenders that support the black community. And that accounts for less than 2% of Netflix's cash. That's what it's doing. It's offering 2% of its cash to shift as much as 100 million. It's shifting 100 million to lenders that support the black community. So then it talks a little bit about the black banks during the Reconstruction and so forth. But then it says commercial banks in the US topped 200 billion in collective profits for the second straight year in 2019. None of the biggest black-owned banks was able to crack 5 million. Just consider that figure, 200 billion. The US-owned banks, the top banks, 200 billion in collective profits. Not one black bank could go beyond 5 million. So the guy says it's the shrinking of the industry is tied to structural racism. Well, it is. See, what you've got is black capitalists want to get in on this racket too. That's the question. And their argument, of course, is it'll improve the black working class, the black working class. And help to undermine racism, which is not true. And so they need the capital, the thing goes on. But it's just a ridiculous thing. When you look at the figures, 200 billion against 5 million, and 50 million deposits. What in deposits? What is that? It's absolutely nothing. The solution is this is what happens when there's a competition between the various sections of the capitalist class, different demographics of them, are sort of struggling to compete with each other. But there's no way they can compete with the 300 years of the white capitalists accumulating capital here. They've got it all, and they're not going to give it up. And the thing is if you getting a few black banks is not going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve the problem of the working class communities people that we all work with, and workplace is very integrated in the most part. It's not going to make any difference with that. The only solution to this is to nationalise the banks, nationalise the financial industry. You don't nationalise the deposits of savers. You don't nationalise the deposits of people who are retired. That their funds are their funds, but there's the hundreds of billions of dollars is stashed in those banks, which is really accumulated capital from the labour power of working people over centuries. That is a collective product. So you nationalise the banks. You nationalise the finance industry, and capital is allocated on a basis of social need. Do we need investments here? Do we need investments there? If you look just north of where I live, East Oakland, it will never. I've been here in this area for 7 years. It will never develop. You can cross the border, and you can see it was mostly black. It's much more integrated now in terms of people of color, Latinos, and Tongans, and Southeast Asians, and so forth. But that will never improve. It will never, marginally, once in a while it'll improve, but it will never go away. And of course, as the crisis has deteriorated, as economic crisis has deteriorated, more crime comes from there to here. And it's generally people of colour, because if they were Irish and white, it'd be white people. People have to live. So the thing is that will not be solved by giving a few black-owned banks $50 million, or Netflix shoving them $100 million, and so forth. It will only be solved if the mass of capital in society is nationalised, is collectively owned, how it is allocated in society is determined in a collective manner by those who use it and those whose labour produce it. This is just a little thought, but just no matter what I've said here, just think of the ridiculous notion that when you look at those figures, that giving a couple of black bankers a little more access into money lending is going to improve the lot of the black people that I've lived and worked with in my 47 years here. It just will not. So anyway, I've actually got a new little setup here, so I'm just trying it out. So I might put this up and I might not. But anyway, it's Richard, and also, well, it's Richard Mellor, Facts for Working People. But also, I've done my first podcast with my friend Monica, and we did a number of them, and we finally got one that we're satisfied to put up. But it's our first one. It's I'll share it maybe on the blog. It's not perfect, but it's a good start, and so hopefully people that follow the blog will also get a chance to see that. It's on SoundCloud as Bridging the Gap. I think there's a lot of them, so you have to look for it. All right, thanks a lot. Richard Mellor, Facts for Working People.